After Sweden granting welfare and pensions for those returning from the Middle East after having fought for the Islamic State, now Denmark, allegedly different from Sweden, is persecuting those who fought against the Islamic State. Let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Now there are news, weird news, and what the bloody hell is wrong with these people types of news. And then there's this kind of news, where the fault lies on a much more complex net of factors. So let's read. Coming from the local Denmark, Danish woman fought ISIS, now she risks prison time. And goes like this, quote, Joanna Palani, a Danish Kurdish woman who fought against the terror group ISIS in Iraq and Syria, may have to serve 6 months in prison for violating Denmark's so-called foreign fighter rules. Palani, a Danish citizen who came to the country as a 3-year-old refugee, had her passport confiscated last year and was slapped with a 1-year travel ban for violating the rules, which are meant to make it easier for authorities to stop Danes from fighting alongside terror groups. She was jailed last week and has admitted to violating her ban by traveling to Qatar in June. It's unknown if she also visited war zones on that trip, but Palani has spoken openly in the Danish press about traveling to war zones in the past to fight against ISIS. I would rather die in battle than on the run, she told Politiken newspaper in a 2014 interview. She has criticized the Danish authorities for pursuing her under the foreign fighter rules, even though she is ostensibly on the same side as the Danish military. How can I pose a threat to Denmark and other countries by being a soldier in an official army that Denmark trains and supports directly in the fight against the Islamic State, she wrote on Facebook when she lost her passport. Palani, 23, has fought alongside the Kurdish Peshmerga forces, which are supported by Western nations including Denmark. However, she has also been associated with the Kurdish militia group YPG, which has ties with the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, which is officially recognized as a terror organization by the European Union and the United States. The case against Palani got underway last week in Copenhagen City Court, but is being held behind closed doors. According to her lawyer, she will be back in court on December the 20th and risks a 6-month prison sentence for violating her travel ban. Now, the popular, or rather the expected reaction to this kind of story is usually alongside the lines of bloody cucks, this fine lady fights kebab oppression and yet they still punish her? Outrageous! But the devil is in the details. Now, it is true that this fine lady did nothing wrong and that persecuting her is completely mental, but not for the reasons one might be tempted to think. Why? Because it is also true that she did break the law and that the law itself isn't a bad law. It's the facts that are wrongly interpreted. Basically, it does make perfect sense for a state to try to prevent its own citizens from fighting for the terrorists, and it does make perfect sense to prosecute those that do it. But it also makes a lot less sense to persecute those who fight basically on your side just because they do it under the banner of a fellow coalition member that someone with a stake in it declared it a terrorist. Because that's exactly what has happened here. It says in the article, quote, Palani, 23, has fought alongside the Kurdish Peshmerga forces, which are supported by Western nations including Denmark. However, she has also been associated with the Kurdish militia group YPG, which has ties with the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, which is officially recognized as a terror organization by the EU and the US. Now, there are a few assertions made in this phrase. One of them is misleading at the very least, and the others are true. The misleading assertion is that the Kurdish militia group YPG has ties with the PKK. Now that is not a fact. It is true that the PKK is a terrorist organization. Heck, they just staged another strike in which innocent people died. They're basically commie terrorists. Free helicopter rides is the appropriate treatment for such scum. And the Turkish state is absolutely correct to try to crush them whenever it finds them. Now, with that being said, it is also true that the Turkish state has used the existence of the PKK as a tool to demonize all Kurds for any reason, and by extension all Kurdish organizations or any structure that is majority Kurdish. And this is exactly what happened to the YPG. Now, the YPG is a political party in Syria founded in 2003 that gathered a military wing as well as a result of the outbreak of the civil war currently going on there. Now, this is nothing shocking in that part of the world. Many political parties in Syria and Iraq tended to have a military wing as well, and this has been going on since at least the early 2000s, so the YPG is not exactly special in this regard. Now, the Turkish state, either out of ill intent or out of excessive paranoia, labeled the YPG right after its formation as the military wing of the PKK. That's it. Nobody ever proved the validity of that assertion. Basically, some bureaucrats in Turkey merely asserted this 13 years ago, and everyone else, especially the entirety of NATO and the Danish state in particular, simply believed it, because the Turks say so. What few are willing to admit is that the Turks would label anything Kurdish to be PKK under the principle of better safe than sorry, and also as a fine excuse to deflect any look that one might take into how Turkey treats its Kurdish minority. In other words, few are willing to consider that maybe, just maybe, taking Turkey on its word from 13 years ago to prosecute some random Kurdish ethnic today for fighting on, basically, our side is, well, a bit too far. So yeah, this lady did break a law that is fundamentally a good law that should not be abolished. What should change, though, is the threshold for its enforcement. Is YPG a terrorist organization? Well, if it is, then it would be the first terrorist organization in modern history to be both terroristic and so stealth that nobody has ever been willing to bring any semblance of proof of them being terrorists, even though they've allegedly been terroristic for 13 years. In other words, no, the YPG is not a terrorist organization for all intents and purposes. Not according to available evidence at the very least. And no, 13-year-old smearing by the Turkish state does not constitute evidence. So yeah, the Danish state is wrong for persecuting this lady, but not because they have a bad law, but because they blindly trust the word of an authoritarian Islamist human rights suppressing regime like Turkey over the reality known to and by the Kurdish people. If they want to prevent people from fighting for the terrorists, the Danes should take a look into their Islamic communities. Plenty of ISIS fanatics there. Leave the Kurds alone. They're very unlikely to pose a threat to Denmark or to Europe in general. I mean, seriously, even the most insane and radical Kurds are still creating trouble in Turkey and not in Europe. The best thing we can do is to stay out of it. The next best thing we can do is to help the Kurds fight against kebab. The absolute worst we can do is to prevent the Kurds from fighting for themselves and thus against kebab. I mean, seriously, Denmark, let her be. She has a point. Just because Turkey said something 13 years ago does not make it so. Anyway, with all of that being said, I hope I brought new information that the press hasn't, and thank you for watching. I'll see you soon on Freedom Alternative.